And we are back. It is time to give you an update on the Maverick R. So far I am liking it. The car is great. You probably notice I'm a little more enthusiastic on this video than I was in the first couple of videos. But it takes a while to get used to this car. You can't just go out there and do a 10-minute ride like the Can Am people do on the little tour and expect people to make a decision. I mean, this thing takes a couple of days to get the first feel of it, and then from there, you got to encounter different situations to see how it is. So we've got a little over 400 miles in this car now. We did another Glamis trip to Veterans. That was actually our first time spending the Veterans weekend at Glamis, and if you get a chance to go, please do. The ceremony of changing out the flag, that flagpole, is pretty intense and very entertaining also. Flyovers by big planes and all that sort of stuff. It's really cool. It's really cool. So I went ahead and made some notes here because if I don't make notes, I'll forget what to cover. So I want to talk about how the car is doing, my impressions of the car after putting 400 miles on it. A little over 300 miles of that, or right about 300 miles, is Glamis time. So this is going to be pretty partial to going out in the sand, using the sand tires, using the power, things like that. And also it's going to be in comparison to my previous cars, which I've had two previous X3s. I'm a Polaris guy too. I've had a couple Polaris, 4-seater, 2-seater. Back in the Rhino days, I did a Rotax conversion, so you know, I'm not totally partial to Can Am, although they do make a fine product. So I want to talk about overall tuning with the car. The car is super impressive. Yeah, the tire and wheel choice, the stance and everything may have something to do with it, but the car is very planted. You can go on some off-camber stuff, some side-hilling stuff, and you really feel secure. You don't feel like you're going to lose it. I've been at fault of leading other people and gone on some things that were kind of sketchy for other people, and they didn't make it. You probably saw that in the previous video. Power-wise in the dunes, that's very powerful. Like you see in all the other videos, you're going much faster than you realize. The car will go up hills. At the top of the hill, you're going much faster than you realize, or that you've been in previous cars. And when you've got some room, like out at the drags or something, it's like, you know, it doesn't start tipping off after 60 miles an hour. Does. I won't say it's better or worse than the X3 in the tuning department, but it is a lot different, and I'll cover more of that later on. But I will tell you that this car is heavier. You do feel it, and I will say part of this might be because it is so planted. It doesn't feel as nimble out in the dunes as the X3. It goes where you point it, it goes where you steer it, it does everything you want, but you're not dancing around and having some of the fun you might have in an X3. And I'll kind of go over that more. When you do the little dunes and so on, the X3 is easier to kind of blip over small sand hills or coming out of a small dune, or even the top dune if you're not going too fast and you want to just pop a wheelie or do a little bunny hop or something. Comfort. The car's got the same exact seats as the X3. I would say that they're fair, maybe not good, slightly less than adequate, but they do give you a little more support under your legs than the Polaris. The Polaris tends to be real short. These have a little more under the leg, give you some support there. It does have a larger cab than the X3. Just the width, the leg room, the knee room, they moved the ignition switch, just the dash placed the way it is and everything. You just got more room inside. You still do have to step over that high, the door opening to get in and out, and it's kind of angled back, and that is a bit cumbersome. But once you're in the car, it is a bigger cab. This does have more visibility than the X3. When you're looking over the hood, with all things the same as far as where the seats adjust and everything, the hood on this one is shorter and lower, so you're seeing over much better than you are in a X3. Now, probably not as well as you see out of a Razor, but this car, you're more sitting in the car as opposed to when I'm sitting in a Razor, I feel like I'm sitting on the car. This has great ground clearance, and in the previous, this much travel, this much width and everything, it just makes sense with the geometry. You're going to be sitting higher off the ground. Previous video talked about the width of this. It was about 89 inches wide. That really had zero effect on the duning capability of this car, or it didn't impair it at all. Okay, so let's talk about suspension. Out of the box, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But you did see I did some preload adjustments on it. I kind of had some foresight on what I was going to be running up against. So I did add some preload with it, and I think that was very beneficial. Out in Glamis, I'd come across a couple other Mavericks, go up to them, and kind of one of the first things would ask me is, are you having trouble bottoming out? And I tell them, no, I'm not. I'm not having trouble bottoming out. The car does good. I mean, as long as you're in the right suspension setting for the activity you're doing, the car does great. But I think that more than likely, the other people did not give it some more preload. I think the ideal area for getting inches and all that kind of stuff is adjust your preload so you got about 17, 18 degrees angle on your axis. I did show you where I put the crossovers on the previous video. It was a little harsh in the rear. I mean, it's harsh anyway, but I raised the crossovers only about an inch, and it was actually a very noticeable difference. Okay. With that, this thing is just a monster in the whoops and the G-outs for a stock suspension. You're in control all the time. It's kind of one of those situations where you're hitting the whoops. If you're going at 40 miles an hour, it's great. 45 it's not, 35 it's not. But this car, really, you hit the whoops at just about any speed. Yeah, there's a sweet spot, but you're not out of control if you cross the whoops at the wrong speed. It is, like I mentioned earlier, pretty harsh in the rear over the chatter. And I think that's going to be in the tuning of the shock. The front, not so much, but the rear definitely, it is harsher. Now, when I added some preload, yeah, that made the spring stiffer, but I don't think that really has all to do with it. I think that the shock valving has to do with how the chatter is. So it could always be better, and that's why there's going to be a tune in the future of this car. Moving on to power. So in normal mode, you've heard me say it, you've heard other people say it, it's really kind of a dog. I mean, it's just doggy in normal mode, but it's meant to be. The car isn't, in that mode, I would say the intended reason to be in normal mode is just for some flat trails and just cruising, and you don't need all the power at once. I have noticed in normal mode, if you get in a little bit of a pickle, you need some power, you give it some throttle, and it doesn't help much. But I've also noticed if you put that throttle all the way to the floor, then it'll kick in and get you out of that trouble. But if you're in trouble, you probably should hit sport mode or something anyway. The trans in normal mode, like I said, shifts quickly. It lets you run at a lower RPM. So you can basically cruise 35, 40 miles an hour and the engine's not revving at 5,000, 6,000 RPM. You're just kind of humming along, and it just brings down everything to more comfortable and more pleasurable. The fuel mileage in normal mode is amazing. Not last trip, the trip before, we went from Glamis Flats to Duner's Diner and back. It was 57 miles round trip according to this odometer, and the car was full when I started. When I came back, it was down 2 bars. Now, I know not all gauges are the same, and these gauges are probably off, but I wasn't out of fuel. I wasn't down to half a tank. I was probably somewhere between half and 3/4 in reality. Tank was showing I was about 3/4, but that's pretty good. So you know that if you use normal mode or going down Sand Highway all the way to Duner's Diner stuff, and you're starting from the flats, that you've got enough fuel that you can come back and you can hit swing set, flagpole, lizard, brawly, olds, everything else, and play around on the way back and not have to worry. And my E85 car, no, I couldn't do that. Let's talk about sport mode. So out in the dunes, sport mode is what I used most of the time. Part of that reason I was in sport mode compared to Sport Plus is when you're in Sport Plus, it's got that rolling anti-lag all the time. It's got that spit and sputter when you're at the top of the throttle or off the throttle. And I'm just not used to that. And when I'm just cruising the dunes, I don't need to be that aggressive anyway. So it's got really good power in sport mode, but like comparing to an X3, it does have some, you can feel the turbo lag. Put your foot into it, it takes a half a second to a second to fully react and go for you. The transmission does shift more aggressively, and when it shifts, I mean, it's upshifting and downshifting more aggressively. So you're coming off a dune and you're transitioning to the next dune, and naturally the car, your momentum is slowing down, it's downshifting for you, so when you're ready to hit that gas, you're in the right gear to go again. Sport Plus. I really only used Sport Plus, and let's call it extreme tuning. I consider myself to be somewhat of an extreme tuner compared to the average. And I only say that because a lot of people have a hard time keeping up with the pace that I like to go, and some just can't keep up and they end up wrecking. But I enjoy to go slow too, but what I'm saying is I kind of put it to the test in Sport Plus. So in Sport Plus and you're doing, it's super snappy because it wants to run in the higher revs. I mean, even when you put it in drive, it's idling like 2,200 RPM. So it's upshifting late, it's downshifting early, it's keeping those RPMs, say between 5, 6, 7,000 RPM. Of course, you're peaking out at 8,200, but it's staying up there all the time. Even if you're cruising, your RPMs are going to be up there because it wants to be ready to go. So Sport Plus is pretty awesome. I don't think you have to be in Sport Plus all the time. You can be very happy doing around in sport mode. Sport Plus uses a lot of fuel. The RPM's up all the time. You've got the anti-lag going on. I'm sure there's some fuel consumption going on with that. I'm probably wrong, but most likely all that has to do with the high RPMs. Everything's high RPM in Sport Plus. It really seems to be a waste to use Sport Plus all the time if you're out there tuning. If you do it, you're going to worry about your fuel mileage because it drains it pretty fast. This thing, big hunk of metal. Transmission. Overall, the auto mode is better than you can do manually. Yes, I can drive a standard transmission, all that kind of stuff. That's what I learned on my first car was a standard transmission. So what I'm saying is in the dunes, when you're duning and stuff, there's a lot of speed fluctuations. You notice this if you're going to side by side and then you go ride with some sand rails for a while. You notice that they kind of maintain a same speed for a good part of the time because they don't want to be shifting all the time. It's nothing bad. But when you're in a side-by-side group, you're zipping and you're slowing down almost to a stop, and you're zipping again and slowing down to a stop. The auto mode shifting will keep up with you. If you're doing that in manual mode, I assume that you would, and I've tried it, you would catch yourself a lot of times not in the right gear. Yeah, the car is just almost always in the right gear for whatever you're doing. I'll go over some exceptions in a bit here. Situations that the auto mode doesn't do well. Yeah, there are some. Making it repeatable, not always easy, but I can tell you where you can't repeat it. Climbing China wall. It's a tall, steep dune, right? Starting at the bottom of China wall, from dead stop, hitting throttle, it'll go through first, into second, and RPM's come up, and boom, you hit in third. And the third is like, you're only going about 6,600 RPM, and you got a big heavy load on it. So boom, it shifts down into second. Now you're doing 8,000, 8,200 RPM, and it feels like it's screaming. You got it floored. So it's time to shift to third. Go to third. Now you're back down to about the high sixes. So it will hunt back and forth on a situation like that. Second, third, second, third, second, third. So that's a situation where the auto mode doesn't work the best. But what do? You just have to back off the throttle a little bit, blip the paddle shifter, keep it in second gear. You do fine. A X3 or Razor, something with a CVT, they'll go in gear 2.5. Right? Because if you got a clutch right, it's always in the right gear. So it won't do that hunting thing. It likes 2.5, it'll go to 2.5 or 3.5 or 3 1/3 or whatever. CVT is always in the right gear if you got a clutch right. So what else would you use? I'll call it the auto manual mode. When you're in auto mode and you're cruising along, you can still work the paddle shifters. And I'm not talking about going from auto to manual. You do that with a long pull on both paddle shifters for about 3 or 4 seconds, and it goes into manual mode. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're in auto mode, you're cruising, and if you're in the right RPM range and you blip the downshift, it'll downshift, or blip the upshift, it'll upshift. It won't do it if it's going to go into the wrong range where your luggage is on, but it'll manually shift for you when you're in auto mode. So when do I do that? When do I use the auto manual mode? So the China wall thing, after climbing it a few times, I know that it doesn't like third gear with it floored. Will it hold third gear if I let the throttle? Yeah, probably, but floored, no. So I just bring it back into second gear and just hold it, bring it up to 8,000 RPM, whatever, and just hold it in second gear. Another time that I would use the auto manual mode is if I'm cruising up to a dune and I'm going on a flat and I know I'm going to hit the dune. Well, I know because I can see it, but the car doesn't know until you're into that dune. So if I want to hit that dune aggressively, and say if it's a short dune, I want to blip off the top, I'm going to downshift before I even hit the dune. The car doesn't know to do that. It only knows throttle position, load, things like that. So if you want to be playful in the little dunes and try to get some little hops over the dunes and bring the wheels up and stuff, you're probably going to want to override the auto mode and put it into a lower gear at times. Full manual mode. When would I use full manual mode? Well, other than just playing around and thinking that I'm manually shifting this car when you're not, because you're not working a clutch, it's still doing a lot of work for you. So, other than just playing around and thinking I'm feeling manly, there's not much time you're going to use the full manual mode. There's just no need. The car is smart enough, the transmission is smart enough, the engineers have done their homework. This thing shifts really, really well in auto mode. with those minor exceptions. But it's so easy, just downshift it real quick. It's so easy. The tires. So my sand tires, I made a video about this, just for review in case you're coming to the channel for the first time. By the way, welcome. These are 34-inch Scat Tracks. The 13.5 inches wide, has 14 Demon paddles on it. So the Demon paddles are full width, a little bit taller. I want to say it's a 1 inch or a 7/8 tall, a little bit taller than the Talon. Talon's a full width, but it's shorter. And these paddles are working pretty good. The fronts are 34 by 10s, and they're buffs. And you've seen that right there. I like the buffs. Car steer is great and everything else, but there's so many ruts in the sand and everything. I like to kind of float over those ruts rather than to be grabby. And as far as steering, you know, I run 4-wheel drive most of the time, but even in 2-wheel drive, I got no problem steering. It's not a sand rail where you got 500-600 pounds hanging off behind the rear axle. The weight's pretty much 50-50. You got the weight you can turn. You don't have to have ribs or whatever. If you got them and you like them, no problem, but the buffs turn just fine. These paddles are not over paddled in Sport and Sport Plus. If you're in normal mode, yeah, it'll drag you down some, but you should be in normal mode if you're not doing it anyway. Sport and Sport Plus, you can still blow these things off and throw a big old roost. But you can also, in Sport and Sport Plus, you can be top of the throttle and you can tractor around the dunes. There's not a lot of slippage in these things. Can you throw it sideways? Yeah, you got to work out to throw it sideways. If you like to slide and everything, you probably don't want this aggressive of a paddle. But you can roost these things off in Sport Plus easily. Would I do this setup again? Yeah, in a heartbeat. I'd recommend this setup. I'm sure there's other setups that work really, really well, but just from personal experience, I like this setup of this car. The lights. The headlights, you know, I ran it around here in the yard, and you know, the low beams, they make a big old flood. Oh, that's kind of cool. And the high beams are more of a spot pattern. But you know what? When you're out in the dunes, here I got a lot of trees and everything for the light to bounce off of. When you're in the dunes and things are flat and whatnot, that flood doesn't penetrate the night, and it's basically worthless. The high beams, they're pretty directional. From the factory, these high beams were pointing up too high. I brought them down, it helped, but I would venture to say that these headlights are not as good as the stock X3 headlights. They're just not that great. Maybe okay for the trails, but not so much in the dunes. Maybe okay in the desert, light up the rocks on the edge and you see the trail a little better or whatever. But I wouldn't be happy with just these headlights. I did add, and I might do a video on this later. I'll pop up a thing from Amazon right here. I added some Amazon lighted mirrors from X-Brite. 110 bucks. They're pretty good mirrors. And the light is just amazing. I cannot believe how good the light is from these things. Are these Sector 7s? No. Are they $900? No. But they work damn good. In fact, the lighted mirrors work better than the headlights. So if I only had one, I'd run the lighted mirrors. Absolutely. I did add kind of the old school, 12-inch flat LED light bar below the front grille. And it's just too pointy. It's got flood on the edge, but it's spot in the middle. And I need something that's just going to bring more light. So that 12-inch light bar is not going to last very long. I'll probably get a Onyx or something like that on there. I did talk to the Baja Design guys. As you know, they have a replacement headlight for the X3s, and they work really good. I had Heritex on one of my last X3s. Worked really good, but I don't think they worked as good as the Bajas would. So when talking to the Baja Design guys, they expect to have a headlight conversion kit in December. So I'll be in the front of the line to get that kit because these headlights are not so good. The overhead scoop, because this car came with a windshield originally, it has a scoop on top. I think I'm going to keep that. It makes the inside even quieter because it's a block-off plate where the air intake would normally be in the overhead scoop. I can't put a full width like chase light bar back there. I'm going to have to do just the individual lights on each side or something like that. Probably just going to do a single amber and put my switch panel on pulse or something like that. I'll be fine with that. Conclusion. As a dune car, I'm very happy with it. You know, I've had 3-wheelers, quads, VW dune buggies, Corvair dune buggies. Haven't had the big sand rails, the big V8 cars, but you know, of course, the side-by-sides. You know, the crappy Yamaha with a stock motor, and then the Rotax, and then built the Razors or whatever. This is a great dune car. It's aggressive, it's powerful, and the suspension works really great for a stock car. Like I said, you can feel the extra travel it has over X3. It's great. It's another nice thing about the suspension on this car is it doesn't case out. On an X3, unless you're running a 35-inch tall tire, the frame will hit the ground before the shocks bottom out. This car with the stock 32-inch tires, my understanding from the engineers is that when the shock bottoms out, the frame is still 4 inches off the ground. So when you saw the Polaris Pro R come out and brag about their suspension, which they should, and they called it usable travel, because they knew the Can Am didn't have usable travel unless you put a real tall tire on it. This car's got all usable travel. I believe it's 25 in the front, 26 in the rear, or maybe 26 all around, but you can definitely feel it's more than, even though it's a couple inches, you feel that it's more than an X3. As far as zipping around the dunes, it's not as playful as, say, one of my previous X3s, which was a big turbo car pushing out well over 300 crank horsepower and being several hundred pounds lighter than this car. But it's very manageable, very controlled, and in a high-speed run, this probably would outrun that other X3 because I would run out of clutch and everything else. Up against an X3 stock to stock, if you're out on a asphalt road somewhere, what I've seen and kind of experienced is the X3 is going to beat this thing out of the hole. You know, it's in the right gear all the time, right? You want the anti-lag. It's going to kind of rev up a little bit, but it won't take long for this car to overtake, especially when you get past 60, 70 miles an hour. No, it's not always this is not always in the right gear compared to a CVT. But I can cruise around. I can keep it at a low RPM when I'm just cruising. Run out to Dooner's Diner, you know, it wouldn't hit 7th gear until almost 60 miles an hour. But I was cruising at 60 miles an hour in 7th gear at 4,000 RPM. So that was nice. That was especially when you're going for over 20 miles doing that. Also, this doesn't have that slippery feel. You know, the CVT, you know, you're hitting the gas, the RPM's going up, but you don't have that direct one-to-one feeling. This has the direct one-to-one feeling. But probably the biggest thing that I'm liking over this, and I had really good luck with this on my X3s, but this has no belt. So that is really, really cool. The transmission, yeah, it's still an unknown, the durability and all that. The engineers at Can Am assure me that I can't break this transmission. I can't wear it out and whatnot. I mean, this thing is huge. This transmission is probably bigger than a Honda Civic or any of those others. And it's got a giant transmission cooler with dual fans on it. So it runs cool, you know. I wish I had a temperature gauge, yes, but I'm really not that worried about it. So, what do we have coming up? Coming up is another long holiday weekend, and traditionally we usually do that Thanksgiving holiday weekend out in the Spangler off-road area near Ridgecrest, California. So we will get some desert time with this thing. Out in the desert, hard pack, different tires and wheels, obviously. The power requirements are going to be different. I suspect I'll be running in normal mode quite a bit. Heck, even in the X3, I ran in eco mode a lot, especially going over the whoops and you don't have You know, you don't want that throttle surging so easily. You want a little more give there. So I suspect I'll be in normal mode a lot with this thing out in the dunes. Suspension wise, the chatter is going to show up a lot more in the desert. The sand's more forgiving. Yeah, you get a little bump stuff in the sand, but you notice when you roll over the sand, it moves out of your way. The desert, not so much. So I expect to have a lot more chatter in the sand. And when you're hitting the whoops and everything, there's no give there. So it's going to be a test. What mode am I going to want to run in? And out in the desert, we tend to do more destination rides. You know, if we're going to do a big round loop, Husky Monument, Randsburg, you know, or if we include Jawbone or something and come back, you're talking about a 120-mile ride. That's a good little ride, and that's a lot of time in the car. So the comfort level is going to be tested in this car. So anyway, I hope you like this review. Sorry for referring to the notes. I don't claim to have things memorized. Hopefully this information will help you relate to how you like your Maverick R, or whether you want to get a Maverick R. Please tune into the channel frequently. We're getting a lot of traction now. Thank you guys. Thanks to all the new subscribers. You know, like every other channel says, it's true. 80+% of the viewers are not subscribers. So get us some subscribers. It gets it out there, it gets more exposure, and gets more people to come to the channel, and encourages me to get more content out to you guys. Anything else you want to see on this car? You know, not too long ago I had a request for an oil change video, so I did an oil change video on it. Any questions you have about this car, please ask. I respond to comments pretty quickly, and if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. But thanks for tuning in. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and we'll see you on the next one.